Millionaire calls missing applicant, but a little girl answers, and what she says brings him to tears. Let me tell you a story, one that starts in frustration and ends in a miracle. A story about a phone call no one expected, and a little voice that shattered a billionaire's world with 6 simple words. It begins like many things do in a gleaming corner office. The city of Chicago pulsed below sunlight, glinting off mirrored towers as Jordan Beck slammed his palm on his desk, hard enough to rattle the gold pen that bore his initials. "Unacceptable," he barked. His assistant Evelyn stood quietly by the glass wall. She'd worked for him 15 years and seen outbursts like this more times than she could count. She didn't even call to cancel, he demanded. "No, sir." Not a word, Evelyn replied evenly, but her references were glowing. Jordan snatched the resume from his desk, scanning the name Claire Monroe. A single mother degree in digital marketing, 5 years, with a startup that folded during the recession. This was a senior-level position, Jordan muttered. "You want to make it in this city, you show up? It's not complicated." He tossed the resume aside. Evelyn hesitated. Perhaps something happened. She had a child listed on her file, a 6-year-old girl, maybe. "I don't care if she had to babysit the Pope." Jordan snapped. "We run $1 billion company. If she can't handle an interview, how would she handle a launch?" He exhaled sharply and reached for his phone. "I'll tell her myself. She needs to hear this. What's her number?" "Jordan," Evelyn started. "The number, Evelyn." She handed it over silently, lips pressed into a line. Jordan tapped in the digits, already preparing his speech. Something about professionalism, standards, the consequences of wasting his time. But when the line picked up, it wasn't Claire Monroe's voice on the other end. "Hello." It was a child. Small, soft, a little girl. Jordan blinked, caught off guard. "I'm trying to reach Claire Monroe." There was a long pause. "Mommy can't come to the phone right now," the girl said. "She's crying in the bathroom." Jordan's hand tightened around the phone. Is she all right?" "She's sad," the girl said honestly. "She missed her meeting. She said it was real important. But we didn't have food. We had to go to the pantry before it closed. Mommy said the job would help everything." Jordan's mouth went dry. The sharp words he'd rehearsed evaporated. He swallowed. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Lila," she replied. "I'm 6. There was a soft rustle. "Mommy has your picture on her computer," she added. "She said you're the big important man she was supposed to meet." Jordan sat back stunned. "Wait, I'm Jordan Beck." The girl gasped. "You're the man in Mommy's folder," she exclaimed. "Mommy said you're my daddy. She says I have your eyes." The air left Jordan's lungs. His body turned to stone. What did you say?" "She says you're my daddy," Lila repeated, quiet this time. "Are you really? Are you going to come see us now?" Jordan barely registered his own voice. He stood dizzy, heart pounding. From the background came the sound of a door creaking. A voice, hurried and alarmed. "Lila, who are you talking to?" "It's Daddy," the girl called out. "He called us." There was a clatter. The phone fumbled, and then a woman's breathless voice came through. "Mr. Beck," she said, "I can explain." But Jordan couldn't speak. His mouth was open, but no words came. Not even a man worth billions, not even the most feared CEO in tech, could have prepared for this. Because sometimes life doesn't knock. It just calls. Jordan Beck sat frozen in his office, the phone still pressed to his ear long after the call had ended. Outside his floor-to-ceiling windows, Chicago buzzed with its usual rhythm. Honking taxis, cyclists weaving through traffic, 1,000 moving pieces that once made him feel invincible. But now, for the first time in years, he felt small. He stood slowly like a man waking from a dream. His reflection in the window showed the truth he couldn't ignore. Salt and pepper hair eyes, shadowed by ambition, and a tremor in his hand that hadn't been there before. He whispered the words again, just to hear them aloud. She said, "I'm her daddy." It didn't make sense. It couldn't. He'd been told, sworn to it by doctors in his 20s, that he couldn't have children. Some complicated aftermath of a high fever, an untreated infection when he was a teen. The words biologically impossible had haunted his early relationships, until he stopped trying altogether. So how could this be? He needed answers. Now. "Evelyn," he said into the intercom, his voice raw. "Bring me everything we have on Claire Monroe, now." Minutes later, Evelyn appeared with a manila folder and a laptop. Jordan sifted through it, hands shaking. Resume, portfolio, school transcripts, letters of recommendation, and there, at the bottom, was a notation. Dependent Lila Monroe, age 6. He opened her social media profile next. Her posts were sparse, mostly art photos of Lila and the occasional uplifting quote. But as he scrolled through, his breath caught. In a blurry photo at a children's museum, Lila beamed at the camera. She was missing a front tooth and holding a balloon animal. And her eyes, they were his. He remembered those eyes from the mirror, cool hazel gray with a fleck of gold in the left iris. Unmistakable. His chest tightened, his world tilted. Another post. A birthday party. Lila held up a homemade cake with a crown on it. In the caption, Princess Lila turns 6. Just the two of us, but so much love. A memory crashed into him, one he hadn't thought about in years. It was at the SXSW Tech Conference in Austin nearly 7 years earlier. He had just closed a massive Series B round and he was riding high, invincible. On a panel about startup culture, he met a woman in the green room, bright, brilliant, fearless, Claire Monroe. She challenged him, laughed at his arrogance, and didn't care about his money. They spent 3 days in a whirlwind, conversations about AI ethics, long walks downtown, and a night that still lingered in his dreams. She'd asked for nothing, not his number, not a promise. He left for New York the next morning, back to the grind, to chase the next deal. But apparently she had tried to reach out. Evelyn, he said, voice like gravel. Did we ever receive anything from Claire Monroe years ago? A call or message? Evelyn hesitated. Yes, sir, she admitted quietly. She called a few times. Left a voicemail. I thought she was like the others, looking for a payout. Jordan turned slowly, stunned. She wasn't, he said. No, Evelyn replied, eyes dropping. She wasn't. He couldn't sit still. He grabbed his coat and keys. Cancel the rest of my meetings, he barked. Where are you going? Evelyn called after him. North Side, he said, already halfway out the door. To see someone I should have seen a long time ago? The streets of Lincoln Square were quiet, a world away from the sterile polish of Beck Tower. He followed the address in Claire's file until he reached a modest brick walk-up. The buzzer beside the door was worn. He pressed it once, twice. No answer. As he turned to leave, the door opened a crack. Claire stood there framed in the light, older than he remembered but still radiant in a way that stopped him cold. Dark hair pulled into a low bun, sleepless eyes, a guarded expression. Mr. Beck, she said, no surprise, no warmth, just weariness. I need to talk to you, he said. Please. She hesitated, then opened the door wider. Inside, the apartment was small but tidy. Children's books stacked beside a well-worn armchair, crayons in a coffee mug, a wall with Lila's drawings, stick figures, suns, and one picture of a man in a suit with a dollar sign over his head. That one hit like a punch to the gut. Claire gestured toward the couch, but remained standing. Is she mine? Jordan asked, voice low. Claire looked at him, eyes unflinching. Yes. He sat down hard. But I was told I can't. I know what you were told, Claire said. But biology had other plans. Why didn't you tell me? I tried, she snapped. You didn't answer, or rather, your assistant didn't let me through. Jordan lowered his head. I thought you ghosted me, Claire continued. I thought you didn't care. He looked up, pain etched across his face. I didn't know, he whispered. They stared at each other across the room. 7 years of silence stretching between them. Just then, a door creaked open. Lila peeked out wearing pajamas with sparkly stars. She held a stuffed bunny in one arm and blinked at Jordan. Is that him? She asked softly. Claire nodded. That's Jordan. Lila stepped closer, cautious, curious. Jordan knelt down, eye level. I'm Jordan, he said gently. I'm good at math. Lila grinned. Me too. In that moment, something shifted. The man who built an empire from code and caffeine finally met the one thing that could rewrite his entire world. Jordan Beck had always been in control of meetings, markets, mergers. But as he walked the halls of the downtown DNA testing clinic 3 days later, his chest felt like it was wrapped in iron. He wasn't prepared for this. Not emotionally, not psychologically, and certainly not physically. The nurse led him to a small consultation room with pastel walls and a humming air vent that seemed too loud in the silence. Claire was already there, seated near the window, her hands folded in her lap, her posture tense but composed. Lila sat beside her, swinging her legs, clutching that same stuffed bunny like it was a shield. Jordan sat down across from them. He'd barely slept in 72 hours. The door opened. A doctor stepped in holding a clipboard. Her expression was neutral, but kind. "Mr. Beck, Ms. Monroe, we've completed the paternity testing." Jordan's heartbeat thundered in his ears. The results show a 98% probability that Mr. Beck is the biological father of Lila Monroe. Silence. No one spoke, not for several seconds. Jordan's vision blurred at the edges. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Claire stared down at her hands, her shoulders relaxing only slightly. Lila glanced up at her mother, confused. "I told you," she whispered. Claire smiled faintly, blinking hard. Jordan turned to the doctor. "Are you sure?" The doctor nodded gently. "It's conclusive." He stood up too fast. The room spun. "I need air," he muttered, pushing through the door. Outside in the hallway, he leaned against the wall. Sweat beaded at his temple despite the air conditioning. "She's mine." The words rang in his skull, 1,000 thoughts crashing into each other. He thought back to his 20s, those sterile doctors' offices, the long talks about low fertility, the confirmation from specialists that kids were off the table. But the tests hadn't lied. He had a daughter, and she'd been growing up without him. Later that evening, he drove north, his thoughts knotted in conflict. What now? Did he try to co-parent? Would Claire even allow that? Did he deserve it? He parked outside their building. The lights in the upstairs window were still on. He could see Claire moving behind the curtains, probably getting Lila ready for bed. He walked slowly to the door, buzzed and waited. Claire answered, a bit surprised, but not unkind. "I thought you'd need time." "I don't have time," Jordan replied. "Not anymore." She opened the door wider. He stepped inside and followed her to the living room. It looked different now, more personal, less like a place and more like a home. Lila was coloring on the floor, headphones on. Her small fingers smudged the edge of the page as she shaded a castle. Jordan knelt beside her. "Hi, Lila," he said. She looked up and grinned. "You came back." He smiled. "I did." She held up her drawing. "I made this today. It's my castle. And this?" She pointed to a tall figure standing beside a smaller one. "That's you. You're the king." Jordan's throat tightened. "That's beautiful." Claire stood in the kitchen doorway, watching them quietly. They put Lila to bed together that night for the first time. Claire read the story. Jordan stayed silent, unsure if he belonged in this space, this ritual. But when Lila reached out for his hand without being asked, something broke inside him. She trusted him already, and he hadn't earned it yet. After Lila drifted off, Claire walked him to the door. "She really does look like you," he said. "I know." I missed everything, he added, guilt thick in his voice. "You missed a lot," Claire said gently. "But she doesn't blame you. Not yet." Jordan looked at her. "Do you—" Claire didn't answer immediately. "I blamed you for years," she said softly. "But I also knew what kind of world you lived in. I thought you might have fought harder to find out." Jordan nodded. "I'm here now," he whispered. "I know," she said, "but being here once doesn't mean you'll stay." That night, Jordan couldn't sleep. He sat in his penthouse surrounded by silence and stone. Everything was in order, his curated art, his imported furniture, his immaculate view of Lake Michigan. But it all felt cold. He wandered into the guest room that had never been used, a place meant for visiting board members or investors. It was spotless, impersonal. He imagined Lila's drawings on the wall, her giggle echoing off the marble floor, her bunny perched on the bed. He didn't just want to visit her world. He wanted to bring her into his. The next morning, he called his assistant. "Evelyn, clear my week. All of it." "Yes, and I want a contractor. We're turning the guest suite into a child's room. Purple, books, everything." There was a long pause. "You got it, sir." He hung up and stared at the window. For once, the view didn't impress him. It just reminded him of what he'd been missing for 6 years. It wasn't a skyline he wanted anymore. It was a little girl, and the life he was going to fight for. It was a quiet Saturday morning in Lincoln Square, the kind Jordan Beck had never noticed before. His weekends were usually filled with pitch decks, private flights, and back-to-back strategy calls. But not today. Today he sat on a park bench near a worn jungle gym, dressed in jeans and a hoodie for the first time in a decade. His Rolex peeked from under the sleeve, but even it seemed out of place here. Across the mulch-covered playground, Lila raced toward a tire swing, her arms outstretched like airplane wings. "Faster! Faster!" she squealed. Jordan gave the swing a push, gentle at first. "Not too high," Claire warned from the sidelines, coffee in hand, a trace of amusement in her voice. "I've got it," Jordan said with a laugh. "She calls me King Swing now. I take that title very seriously." Claire raised an eyebrow. "How's it feel, Your Majesty?" Jordan smiled, but it was a little fragile. He was trying, really trying. He'd been showing up for 3 weeks now. Weekends, evening phone calls, lunch deliveries to Lila's school. No grand gestures, just presence. And yet every time he reached out, there was that question hovering beneath the surface. Am I too late? Later that afternoon, the three of them sat at a booth in a local diner. Lila worked on a coloring sheet while Jordan pushed peas around his plate. "Did you always want to be a daddy?" she asked suddenly. Jordan looked up startled. Claire froze mid-sip. "I didn't think I could be," he said honestly. "Because you were too busy?" she asked. He paused. "Because I didn't think it was possible. Some people said I couldn't have kids. I believed them." Lila blinked. "But here I am." Jordan nodded, his throat tight. "Yes, here you are. Guess those people were wrong." Claire reached over and gave Lila's hand a gentle squeeze. That night back in his penthouse, Jordan stared at the purple-painted walls of the newly finished guest room. Lila's room now. Stuffed animals lined the bed. Bookshelves overflowed with storybooks and STEM kits. In the corner sat a digital art tablet, a gift he wasn't sure he should have bought. But when he saw her face light up, he knew he'd gotten one thing right. Still something nagged at him. He couldn't escape the feeling that he'd missed too much. First words, first steps, first nightmare. He hadn't earned the title of dad. Not yet. The following weekend, Claire invited him to Lila's school for Family Day. He cleared his calendar instantly. They stood outside the classroom door, surrounded by kids pulling parents in every direction. Claire placed a steadying hand on his arm. "You okay?" "I've presented IPOs to the SEC," Jordan murmured, tugging at his collar. "This is scarier." Inside the classroom, kids buzzed around poster boards and macaroni crafts. Lila pulled him over to her station. Her project, My Family Tree. She had drawn 3 figures herself, Claire and Jordan. There was a crown on Jordan's head. "This is you," she said proudly. "Because you're my king dad." Something cracked wide open in Jordan's chest. That evening, as the sun dipped below the lake, Jordan and Claire sat side by side on a park bench, watching Lila chase bubbles with a friend. "She called me dad today," he whispered. Claire smiled. "She's been waiting for the right moment. I haven't done anything to deserve it. She doesn't care about that. She just wants you to keep showing up." Jordan glanced at her. "And you, what do you want?" Claire turned toward him, guarded. "I want my daughter to have consistency, safety, love." He nodded. "Then that's what I'll give her. And I'll keep giving it, even if I mess up sometimes." Claire looked at him for a long moment. "That's a start." In the weeks that followed, Jordan transformed. He delegated company meetings. He rescheduled flights. He bought a worn copy of Charlotte's Web just so he could read it to Lila each night by phone. His executive team noticed the shift. So did the press. But Jordan didn't care about headlines anymore. He cared about bedtime stories, about making Claire laugh again, about seeing pride in Lila's eyes when she beat him at Connect 4. He was learning day by day how to be a father. Not a perfect one, just a real one. One evening, as Jordan tucked Lila in during a sleepover at his penthouse, she reached up and touched his face. "Do you love me?" she asked softly. The question hit him like a tidal wave. He bent down and kissed her forehead. "With everything I am." She nodded. "Good. Mommy said you just needed time to remember." And she was right. Because somewhere between the swings, the storybooks, and the whispered bedtime promises, Jordan Beck found something he never expected to find. Not just the daughter he never thought he had, but the man he never thought he could become. The morning started like any other. Claire packed Lila's lunch, braided her hair into pigtails, and kissed her cheek as she dropped her off at school. Jordan had promised to meet them for dinner after a board meeting downtown. Everything felt normal until the call came at 1:13 p.m. Claire was in the middle of updating a freelance website when her phone rang, an unknown number. "Hello?" "Ms. Monroe," a woman's voice said, brisk but professional. This is Nurse Carlson from Ridgeway Elementary. There's been an incident. Lila collapsed during recess. Paramedics are on site now. The world tilted. What Claire gasped. Is she breathing? She's conscious, but disoriented. We're transferring her to Lakeview Children's Hospital for evaluation. You should come immediately. Claire was out the door in seconds. When Jordan arrived at the hospital 30 minutes later, he didn't bother checking in at reception. He spotted Claire pacing outside a curtained room in the emergency wing, her face pale fingers trembling around a styrofoam cup of water. Where is she? He demanded. Claire turned eyes glassy. Inside, they're running tests. He pulled her into a brief, awkward hug, something they hadn't done since Austin all those years ago. She fainted, Claire whispered. Just collapsed. They said she couldn't stand. She was pale. They thought it might be dehydration, but her vitals. The curtain opened and a doctor stepped out. Mr. Beck, Ms. Monroe, I'm Dr. Fields. I've reviewed Lila's initial labs. There's an anomaly in her kidney function. Jordan blinked. What kind of anomaly? Her creatinine levels are elevated, and there are protein traces in her urine that suggest early signs of renal stress. Given her age, this is highly unusual. Claire gripped Jordan's arm. What does that mean? She asked. We need to admit her for further testing. Blood panels, genetic screening. It could be something as simple as an infection or something more chronic. Like what Jordan said, his voice flat. Dr. Fields hesitated. Alport syndrome. It's rare, but it runs in families. A genetic disorder that affects kidney function, and sometimes hearing or vision. We won't know for sure until the results come in. Jordan swallowed hard. I was told I couldn't have kids, he said more to himself than anyone else. Well, Dr. Fields replied gently, if this is genetic, that assumption may need to be revisited. The next 48 hours were a blur. Lila remained in a hospital bed, surrounded by beeping monitors and IV bags. She was brave joking with nurses and naming her blood pressure cuff Squishy, but Claire could see the fear in her daughter's eyes. So could Jordan. He refused to leave. He canceled everything, meetings, investor calls, a live interview on CNBC. Instead, he sat beside Lila's bed, reading chapters from Matilda and helping her color. Claire watched him quietly. The man who once prioritized market shares was now adjusting pillows and combing his daughter's hair with infinite care. It moved her in ways she didn't expect. 3 days later, Dr. Fields returned with the results. Lila has Alport syndrome, he confirmed. It's impacting her kidneys. We caught it early, but there's no cure. With treatment, we can slow the progression, but she'll eventually need a transplant. Claire's breath caught. A transplant. Jordan's jaw clenched. From whom? Dr. Fields gave them a cautious look. Biological relatives are typically the first candidates. We'll begin compatibility testing for both of you immediately. Jordan nodded. Let's do it. Now. The tests were run the next morning. Claire was a partial match. Jordan wasn't, at least not yet. His blood type matched, but initial tissue typing showed potential incompatibility. Dr. Fields frowned. We'll need to run further genetic panels. There might be underlying markers we haven't seen. What does that mean? Jordan asked. It means we're not ruling you out. There could be something unusual in your genome that makes this harder to interpret. It's not a no, just a maybe. Jordan stood up. Do it. Run every test you have. I don't care what it costs. Claire touched his arm. Jordan. He turned to her, his voice shaking. I just found her. I'm not losing her. That night, Claire stepped into the hallway and called Jordan's phone. He'd gone home to shower and grab clothes. His voice was low when he answered. I'm hiring a private geneticist, he said, before she could speak. I want a second opinion. Maybe a third. You don't have to do this alone. I don't want to do it alone, he said. I want to be here, for both of you. Claire went silent for a long beat. She asked for you tonight, she finally said. She wanted to know if you'd still come to see her, even if she got really sick. Jordan's voice cracked. Tell her yes. Always. In a city that never slowed down, Jordan Beck had finally stopped. For one little girl who taught him that love isn't scheduled and family doesn't follow rules. And in a sterile hospital room, filled with quiet beeping and tiny heart monitors, the man who once measured life in stock options began to measure it in seconds, spent holding his daughter's hand. 3 weeks passed. Jordan Beck lived in two worlds now, the penthouse where the skyline meant nothing, and the pediatric wing of Lakeview Children's Hospital, where every beep from a monitor felt like thunder. His routines had been replaced by rituals, morning coffee runs for Claire, bedtime stories for Lila, and hours spent researching every paper ever published on Allport syndrome. But none of it made a difference. Lila's condition was holding, for now. But the doctors were clear without a compatible kidney, she would eventually decline. Dialysis could buy time, not hope. Claire tried to be strong. She held Lila through restless nights, answered every one of her daughter's questions with the steadiness of a lighthouse in a storm. But Jordan could see the cracks in her armor, how her fingers trembled when she thought no one was looking, how her voice caught on the word transplant, and he felt powerless, until a name from his past returned, one he hadn't spoken aloud in years. William Beck, his father. Jordan was at home when it hit him. He sat in his office late one night, flipping through the limited medical records he'd managed to obtain, and something didn't add up. The doctor who told him he was sterile, he'd only seen him once, briefly. As a teenager after recovering from a severe case of mononucleosis complicated by kidney inflammation, that doctor had been recommended by his father. Jordan remembered the conversation now, hazy and half-buried. "You're lucky," William Beck had said with a pat on the back. "No distractions for your future." Back then, Jordan thought he meant college scholarships and startups. Now it felt like something else, something darker. He picked up the phone and called a name he'd once buried: Leon Grant, a private investigator he used during hostile takeovers. Leon, Jordan said, his voice low. "I need you to find out what my father did 20 years ago. Medical files, payments, conversations, everything, and I need it fast." What Leon uncovered was staggering. Jordan met with him in a quiet booth at a diner just outside the city. The investigator slid a slim folder across the table. "Your father paid Dr. Lyle Jennings $50,000 in 2004, Leon said. "There's no invoice, just a check and a non-disclosure agreement. But this," he tapped the file, "this is a copy of your unaltered medical record. It was buried under a false patient ID." Jordan opened the folder, his hands trembling. It was all there. His kidney anomaly wasn't a reason for sterility. It was a misdiagnosed rare genetic variation, one that matched Lila's. "He lied to me," Jordan whispered. "My own father." Leon nodded solemnly. "To control you, so you'd focus on building his legacy, not your own." That night, Jordan returned to the hospital with the file in hand. Claire was reading to Lila when he walked in. She looked up, startled by the expression on his face. "Can we talk?" he asked. They stepped into the hallway. "I know why I wasn't a match," he said, voice strained. "It's because I was never properly diagnosed. My father paid a doctor to lie to me, to keep me focused on business, not family." Claire's mouth opened in shock. "Are you serious?" Jordan handed her the papers. "Turns out I have the same genetic marker that causes Allport. It's why Lila inherited it. But that also means you could be her donor," Claire whispered, eyes wide. "I already sent the records to Dr. Fields. He's fast-tracking a new compatibility test." Claire leaned against the wall, hand over her mouth. "I thought he was protecting me," Jordan said, staring into the distance. "But all he did was rob me of 6 years I'll never get back." Claire stepped forward, her voice suddenly fierce. "Then don't waste a second more." 3 days later, Dr. Fields returned with news. "You're a rare case, Mr. Beck," he said. "Your kidneys are structurally unusual but healthy, functionally strong, and because of the genetic overlap with Lila's mutation, you're not just a compatible donor." He smiled. "You're the ideal one." Jordan didn't blink. "Schedule the surgery." Dr. Fields held up a hand. "You'll need full pre-op clearance. There are risks. Surgery for a donor with your unique anatomy isn't routine." "I don't care. Recovery could take weeks, longer than average. And once it's done, she'll live." Jordan interrupted. "That's all I need to know." The night before the operation, Jordan sat beside Lila's bed, watching her sleep. The room was dark, except for a small nightlight shaped like a fox. Claire entered quietly and handed him a cup of coffee. "I know you're scared," she said softly. "I've made billion-dollar deals," he murmured, "and I've never been this terrified." She sat beside him. "Do you regret it?" Jordan shook his head. "Not for a second." Claire stared at the monitors, their steady rhythm, like a lullaby. "You're giving her more than a kidney," she said. You're giving her a future. He glanced at her. So are you? They sat in silence, united by fear and something deeper. Before dawn, as the nurses prepped Lila for surgery, she turned to Jordan. Will I have part of you in me? She asked. He smiled, his voice catching. You already do. She looked down at her stuffed bunny, then offered it to him. You take Bun Bun with you, so we're both sharing. Jordan laughed through the tears. Deal. As they wheeled her away, Claire kissed her daughter's forehead, then stepped beside Jordan. You come back to me, she said. Both of you. Jordan nodded. Because in the end, love isn't about what you say. It's what you're willing to give away. The morning of the transplant arrived with a sky so pale it seemed to hold its breath. Inside Lakeview Children's Hospital, everything moved with a quiet urgency. Nurses wheeled in, machines checked charts, adjusted IV drips. There was no music, no television noise. Only the soft beeping of monitors and the rustle of hospital scrubs brushing against tile. Claire stood just outside the surgical prep room, arms crossed tightly over her chest. She wore a loose hoodie and jeans, but nothing could mask the storm of emotions boiling beneath the surface. Across the hallway, Jordan Beck sat on the edge of his own hospital bed, dressed in a pale blue surgical gown. His posture was strong, but his hands trembled as he traced the stitching in the hem of Bun Bun, the stuffed bunny Lila had given him. You ready? A nurse asked gently. Jordan looked up, eyes dark with worry. No, he whispered, but I'll go anyway. They wheeled him toward the operating suite just as Claire stepped into the hall. Their eyes met. She walked alongside the gurney, matching the slow pace. I should have said this earlier, he murmured. Claire held his hand. You don't need to say anything, she said softly. I do, he insisted. If something goes wrong, nothing will, she cut in. You're both coming back to me. Jordan didn't argue. He just nodded, and then he let go. The surgery lasted 6 hours. First Jordan, then Lila. Claire remained in the waiting room the entire time. Her phone buzzed with well-wishers. Evelyn from Jordan's office, the school nurse from Ridgeway, even the barista from the cafe down the street who had gotten to know Lila over the past few months. But Claire responded to none of them. She sat motionless, her eyes fixed on the double doors that led to the operating rooms. When Dr. Fields finally emerged, she rose on unsteady legs. Claire, he said gently, it went beautifully. She blinked, both of them. He smiled. Both are stable. The kidney started functioning immediately. That's extremely rare, and extremely good. Claire's knees buckled slightly. The nurse beside her reached out in time. You'll be able to see them both. Soon, Dr. Fields added. Jordan will recover in post-op for a bit. Lila is being moved to ICU. Claire exhaled for the first time in hours. Later that night, Claire stood at Lila's bedside. The little girl was pale but peaceful, her chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Bun Bun now sat beside her back from its surgical journey. Claire brushed a lock of hair off Lila's forehead and whispered, You're okay. You're okay, baby. Lila stirred. Mom, I'm here. Is Max okay? Claire smiled through a tear. He's okay too. The next day, Jordan was moved into a reclining chair beside Lila's bed. He was sore, his movements stiff, but his heart was wide open. Lila turned her head and grinned weakly. You look funny, she teased, like a sleepy robot. Jordan laughed, wincing at the pain. You're not wrong. She reached out a hand and he took it gently. Thanks for the kidney, she whispered. He squeezed her fingers. Thanks for the bunny. They sat like that for hours, barely speaking, just existing in the quiet together. Claire watched from the doorway, arms folded, a soft smile on her lips. The scene before her didn't look like a miracle, didn't glow or shimmer like in the movies. But that's what it was. A man who had once ruled boardrooms was now ruled by a child's smile. A woman who had once braved motherhood alone now stood beside someone willing to share the weight. And a child fragile and fierce had brought them both back to life. A week passed, then 2. Jordan moved into a guest suite at Claire's new apartment, a compromise they'd agreed on during Lila's recovery. Close enough to help, separate enough to keep things clear, but lines blurred in the best possible ways. Jordan cooked dinner more often than he didn't. Claire critiqued his terrible chopping skills, but praised his persistence. Lila, of course, insisted on supervising them both. They laughed more, talked more, healed more. One night, as they all watched a movie together under a shared blanket, Lila turned to Jordan. Do I have any of your powers now? He looked down at her. What powers? You're good at math. And bossy. Claire snorted. Well, Jordan said thoughtfully, you've always had the smart part. And the bossy part? That might be your mom. Lila giggled. So, we're like superheroes now, she said proudly. Yes, Jordan said, pulling her close. The three of us, in that small, unremarkable living room, something bigger than business or biology happened. A family, real imperfect and fiercely loving, was being built. Not out of convenience, not out of obligation, but out of the one thing they had almost missed. Time. And now they would never take it for granted again. Spring melted into summer with the steady warmth of routine. It was subtle at first. Morning coffee mugs left side by side on the kitchen counter. Grocery lists with Lila's favorite cereal scribbled in Claire's handwriting, and Jordan's all caps, "Remember milk," scrawled underneath. Then came the family calendar pinned to the fridge school, events, doctor's appointments, Jordan's company meetings, and a new edition written in purple marker with glittery stickers, family game night, every Friday. Life had shifted, not overnight, not perfectly, but deeply. Jordan Beck, once defined by his corner office and 15-minute time blocks, was now learning the art of slowing down. Claire watched him from the hallway one afternoon, quietly observing as he sat on the floor of Lila's room, helping her build a solar system out of painted foam balls and yarn. His tie was slung around his neck like a cape, his hands covered in blue glitter, and he looked more present than she had ever seen him. He didn't see her watching. He was too busy listening as Lila explained which planets had rings and which ones didn't. Uranus is my favorite, she said. Why? Because it spins sideways, like it's different and proud. Jordan smiled. That's a great reason. Claire turned away smiling to herself. Later that evening, Jordan found her in the kitchen, balancing a laptop, a notepad, and a lukewarm cup of coffee. Still working on that site for the yoga studio? He asked, peeking over her shoulder. Almost done, Claire replied. They want a booking system, but their budget is optimistic. Jordan scanned the screen. You could build this in half the time with our platform's API. Claire raised an eyebrow. I thought you hired teams for that. I used to, he said with a smirk. But it turns out you're one of the sharpest devs I've seen in a long time. She stared at him skeptical. What are you getting at, Becky? He pulled up a chair beside her and opened his tablet. Pearson Bell, his company, is launching a new educational tech division. We're hiring contract developers for remote work, flexible hours, health benefits, paid leave. You'd report to the project lead, not me. Claire leaned back. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a door, he said. You can walk through it or not, but don't do it for me. Do it because you're damn good and because your code deserves more than late-night freelance hustle. She folded her arms. You rehearsed that, didn't you? 4 times, he admitted. I even practiced in the mirror. Claire laughed. I'll think about it. She said yes 2 days later. Lila cheered when Claire told her. Jordan baked a celebratory cake, boxed mix too much frosting, and absolutely perfect. They were building something now. Not just a family, but a life. One stitched together by compromise, humor, and shared purpose. Jordan's penthouse sat mostly empty. He still visited sometimes, mostly for board meetings or investor calls, but it no longer felt like home. His true life now existed within the walls of Claire's modest apartment, where Lila's art adorned the fridge and laughter spilled from every room. But even that apartment began to feel tight. Claire brought it up one afternoon. I've been looking at places closer to Lila's school, she said cautiously. Something with an extra room for her to play and maybe, space for you, if you're still planning to crash here on weekends. Jordan didn't miss a beat, or we move into something together. Claire froze. Like, together. He shrugged, feigning casual, for Lila's sake, and maybe ours too. She didn't answer right away, but she didn't say no either. The following week, they moved into a newly renovated duplex 3 blocks from the school and 2 from the hospital. It had 3 bedrooms, a small backyard, and a sunroom that Lila immediately claimed for reading time. Claire took the office with the window view. Jordan didn't even argue. They hosted their first dinner in the new place just days later. Nothing fancy, grilled cheese tomato soup and sparkling apple cider. But it felt like Thanksgiving. Lila clinked her glass against theirs. To our house, she said with a grin, and our family. Jordan smiled at Claire, who nodded back with something deeper than words. Nights became sacred. Story time in the sunroom, movie marathons on the couch, late-night coding sessions where Claire would curse her screen while Jordan fetched snacks. They argued sometimes about parenting schedules, the best pizza joint in town. But their fights were rooted in care, not control. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for the first time in his life, Jordan Beck wasn't chasing deadlines. He was learning how to live. One night, as they tucked Lila into bed after a long day at the lake, she looked up at both of them. "Are we going to stay like this?" Claire blinked. "What do you mean?" Lila yawned. "I just like when we're all here, together, like a puzzle that fits." Jordan kissed her forehead. "We're not going anywhere, monkey." Claire took her hand. "Sleep tight, baby." As they left the room and turned off the light, Claire leaned her head against Jordan's shoulder. "You realize she's smarter than both of us, right?" "Obviously," he said. They stood in the hallway for a moment, the quiet wrapping around them like a blanket. This wasn't the life either of them had planned. It was better. The year had moved quickly. 12 months ago, Jordan Beck had never heard the name Lila Monroe. Now her voice was the first thing he looked forward to each morning, and her laugh was the melody that underscored his every decision. The duplex was filled with signs of change. Framed photos lined the hallway. Lila's school portraits, a candid shot of Claire laughing over coffee, a blurry selfie of the three of them at the zoo. The once silent man, who built billion-dollar systems, now sat cross-legged on the floor, helping his daughter build Lego castles with turrets. Jordan's company, Pearson Bell, was thriving under a new CEO he had personally trained. For the first time in his life, he wasn't working for the business. He was working around his family, and he liked it that way. But something still tugged at him every time he looked at Claire. He wanted more. He planned it carefully. Nothing grand, no flash mobs, no viral videos, just something honest, something true. He chose the park where he had first pushed Lila on a swing, the one where she called him King Dad and told him about Uranus spinning sideways. Claire had agreed to meet him there after Lila's checkup. He told her he had a small surprise. She didn't ask questions. She knew him well enough now to let the silence build suspense. That afternoon, the sky was painted in soft pinks and golds, and a warm breeze stirred the leaves. Jordan waited at the park bench with a paper bag holding Lila's favorite cookies and a tiny velvet box tucked deep in his pocket. Lila arrived first, skipping toward him with her backpack bouncing. "Are the cookies in there?" she asked, eyeing the bag. He grinned. "Yes, but you have to share." She sat beside him, pulled out a cookie, and took a bite. "I like this place," she said. "Me too." They sat for a moment before she leaned closer and whispered, "Is this the surprise?" Jordan smiled. "Not quite, but you're part of it." She tilted her head, like a secret mission. "Exactly." Claire appeared moments later, walking toward them, with her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, sunglasses perched on her head. She looked at Jordan with a familiar mix of amusement and curiosity. "All right, what's the small surprise?" Lila bounced up and down. "It's a secret mission." Claire raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" Jordan stood and took a breath. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice steadier than he expected. "A lot." Claire crossed her arms, cautious but listening. "We've built something," he continued. "Not just the three of us living together or co-parenting or juggling schedules, but this." He gestured toward Lila, toward the park, toward the world they'd created. This life together. Claire nodded slowly, eyes narrowing with understanding. "I used to think success was about what I could earn. Now I know it's about who I show up for." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the box. Claire's eyes widened. Lila gasped. "I knew it." Jordan dropped to one knee in the grass suit, and all completely unbothered by the dirt. "Claire Monroe," he said, opening the box to reveal a simple, elegant diamond ring. "Will you marry me? Not just for Lila, not out of gratitude or guilt, but because I love you, because I've always loved you." Claire covered her mouth, eyes watering. From the jungle gym, a little voice rang out. "Say yes, Mom." Other parents nearby turned and smiled. Claire blinked rapidly, looking at Jordan, then at Lila, then back again. "You rehearsed this, didn't you?" Jordan chuckled. "A little." With Lila, she picked the park, said it was more romantic than a rooftop restaurant. Claire laughed through her tears. "She's not wrong." Then she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. Jordan stood and slipped the ring onto her finger. She threw her arms around him, and for a moment, the world melted away. Lila sprinted toward them and launched herself into their hug. "We're gonna be a real family now," she shouted. Jordan kissed her cheek. "We already are, monkey." "But now it's official," Lila said proudly. The three of them stood there, surrounded by playground laughter, gentle breezes, and the future they had almost missed, wrapped in the warmth of second chances. Later that night, as they curled up together on the living room couch, Lila asked the most important question of all. "Do I get to be the flower girl?" Jordan and Claire looked at each other and laughed. "You get to be whatever you want," Claire said. Jordan added, "But maybe leave Bun Bun at home for the wedding photos." Lila rolled her eyes. "No deal." And just like that, a new chapter began. One built not on promises alone, but on the courage it took to rebuild, reconnect, and believe in love again. June arrived on a tide of warm breezes, long sunsets, and laughter echoing through open windows. Lila turned 7 in a backyard full of bubbles, birthday streamers, and neighborhood kids trailing popsicles. There were cupcakes shaped like planets, a magician who did more dad jokes than magic, and a hand-painted sign that read, "Lila's Solar System Bash," sponsored by Mom and Max. Jordan didn't correct her. Not about the Max nickname, not about the co-credit. He liked it that way. His life had changed. Not dramatically, not with a bang, but gradually. One bedtime story at a time, one missed board meeting, one shared dinner, one real conversation. Pearson Bell was now run by a dynamic new CEO whom Jordan handpicked and mentored personally. He remained chairman, stepping in only when needed, but mostly he stayed out of the way. The man who once measured time in quarterly earnings now measured it in Friday night movies, Saturday park swings, and the number of stars Lila could name by memory. And he had no regrets. One Thursday morning, Claire sat across from Jordan at the kitchen table, sipping coffee and scrolling through emails. "There's a part-time weekend coding boot camp starting next month," she said. "I might enroll." Jordan looked up interested. "I thought you were done with all that." "I was, for a while, but I miss learning, building things that matter." He nodded slowly. "Then do it. We'll make it work." She gave him a look. He smirked. "You didn't think I'd let you go back to school without dragging Lila to every Saturday museum exhibit in town, did you?" Claire laughed. "Good point." She paused. "You've changed, you know." Jordan leaned back. "So I've been told." "No, I mean, really changed." He looked at her eyes, sincere. "I found my why Claire. I used to chase purpose like it was always just one deal away, but it was here, the whole time." She reached across the table and took his hand. Better late than never. That evening, the three of them sat on the porch watching the fireflies dance across the lawn. Lila was sprawled across both their laps, telling them about a book she was writing in school. "It's about a girl with superpowers," she said. "But her powers don't work until she figures out what makes her special." "What is it?" Jordan asked, genuinely curious. Lila beamed. "It's love. That's what activates her powers." Claire blinked hard. "That's a pretty powerful story." "I thought so," Lila said, clearly proud. Jordan kissed the top of her head. "I think it might be the best one I've ever heard." As the stars emerged, blinking into view one by one, Jordan thought back to the man he was not so long ago. The one obsessed with control, untouched by empathy, and convinced that love was an obstacle to success. That man was gone. And in his place stood someone who had learned that love wasn't the opposite of ambition. It was the reason for it. That a child's laughter could reroute your entire legacy. That a missed interview could lead to a miracle. The next morning, while packing Lila's lunch for summer day camp, Jordan scribbled a note and tucked it into her bag. "To my favorite superhero, never forget that your heart is your greatest power. Love, Max." Later that day, Claire found a matching note taped to the fridge. "To my favorite co-founder, thank you for building this life with me. Love, Jay." She smiled, folded it, and tucked it in her journal. They didn't need perfect to be happy, just each other. Some stories begin with love at first sight. Others begin with heartbreak missteps, or, like this one, with a phone call that wasn't meant to be answered. Jordan Beck's story didn't follow the rules. It didn't come neatly wrapped or conveniently timed. It came years too late, cloaked in regret, tethered to a quiet voice on the other end of a line saying, "Mommy says you're my daddy." And in those 6 simple words, a lifetime of certainty unraveled, and something far more beautiful began. This isn't a story about perfection. It's about persistence. It's about a man who believed he couldn't love because he was told he couldn't father, and a little girl who proved him wrong with every smile, every question, every crayon drawing labeled Dad. It's about a woman who raised her daughter in strength and silence and found the courage to let someone else try. And it's about the miracle that lives in second chances. When you strip away the money, the titles, the missed years, and medical charts, what's left is something simple and profound. A family. Not one that came easy. Not one without scars. But one built on presence, resilience, and hard-earned trust. Because sometimes it takes getting lost in the wrong version of yourself to stumble into the right one. So if you're ever wondering whether one moment, one choice, can change everything, remember this story. Remember the call. And remember the man who answered not with anger, but with love.